About a year ago, I did my first fantastic Shadow Tomes tier list, and in that year, there's been lots of balance adjustments to Shadow Tomes, some updates to them, and lots of new ones added. So that old tier list video is now horribly out of date and in need of a new, even better video where we go over the Shadow Tomes again. Now, with all my tier list videos, I do like to remind everybody that if you just want to see the tier list itself, you can skip to the end of the video, but doing so will not do you a lot of good. That is because looking at tier lists is it's going to give you a general idea as to how good tomes are, but there are tomes that I do not rank very highly that are outrageously overpowered in certain builds, and I will go over that. But when I do make a tier list, I like to generally rank them just based on how, like, if you threw this into your average build, how good would this tome be? And some tomes that, again, in certain builds are really powerful would not be so powerful in your average build. With all my videos, I also do like to tell you guys that this is not like definite. Don't think that something is B and C tier, therefore unplayable. I would only really say if a tome makes it all the way down to D tier that it becomes straight up unplayable. We will be talking about some of the adjustments tomes have had since I did my last video, but for the most part, this is just going to be a standalone new tier list video. We're not going to be comparing back to the old video very often, only when it's something that people who've played this game a while might not notice because it's been kind of a subtle little change. Now, the tiers I do, S tier is generally going to be something that's like really powerful, potentially just in need of a nerf. A tier is going to be something that's generally good in all the situations. B will be something that's generally good in most situations. C will be something that could be really good in certain builds, but overall will have other tomes that do better. Because this is a Shadow Tome tier list, we will be comparing these tomes mostly against other Shadow Tomes. Very rarely in these videos do I like to compare to, like, if I compare Shadow to Materium, well, obviously Materium is going to be better at production. So if I'm just comparing them to how much production, you know, you get my idea here. Okay. So, as with all my videos, do make sure to like, do make sure to subscribe, do make sure to leave a comment down below. All these things help me out immensely. Additionally, I am trying to shill for my Patreon so that we can get a steadier income on Patreon, because I just think that's better. YouTube is a bit finicky at times. The last thing I want to say is it was my birthday 2 days ago. I've spent that time. You probably noticed I haven't made videos or streamed for a couple days. That's because I was trying to just take a break and not be on caffeine. I drink a lot of caffeine and sometimes I just need a break to like reset it. So this video might be a little bit long because I'm not going to have that energy that I used to do to speed these videos up and make them quite short. So as always, you can use this as a podcast. You can put this on your second monitor. You can listen along. We're just going to be going over the tomes and talking about the units and the spells and all that stuff within them. So yeah, you can just go ahead and listen along. You don't need to watch. That helps viewer retention, and then viewer retention allows YouTube to push this video more, because if videos get more viewer retention, they do better. So let's start at the top then. I think I went through the entire introduction in a mere 3.5 minutes. Tome of Necromancy. Tome of Necromancy, I think I originally didn't rank too high, but over time it started to come more and more, in my opinion, into its own. Tome of Necromancy has several very large advantages. Number one, the Necrotize spell is outrageously powerful for early battles. It's potentially one of the best spells in the game, I think, for playing out these early battles. At a mere 10 mana per, it just is exceptionally powerful. Soulwell is a research SPI. Now, this research SPI is a what do you call those? Special province improvement. There we go. I always want to call them single province improvement. Special province improvements that are research posts are really powerful, because if you do have one, that ensures you can get the academy building to get that 20 knowledge, because it does require a research post. Sometimes your capital just can't quite reach to get a research post. It's a bit more rare these days. They have improved map generation a little, but it still does happen time to time. You also need 2 research posts to get a Scholars Guild, and Scholars Guilds are quite powerful. And then once you have a Scholars Guild, each additional research post gives you 10 more knowledge. I'm just going to say that all now, because there are going to be quite a lot of tomes here that will have research posts within Shadow, and that's just good to know that research posts are really, really powerful. Okay, so we have a very powerful combat spell right here in Necrotize. I'm going to call, by the way, Necromancy, I'm going to call Tome of Necromancy, is an A-tier tome. Really, really powerful. So one of the best combat spells in the game for clearing the map early, taking fights. A pretty decent SPI. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. 5 souls is decent. So instead of 5 research, you get 5 souls, which is, yeah, it's not too bad. 3 mana per adjacent research post or conduit. That one's not too great. You'll often not hit it. And even if you do hit it, we're talking about 3 mana, so not that big of a deal. We do have a world map spell over here, Soul Collection. I will often not cast Soul Collection because it's 10 souls for 30 income, and that's pretty rough. But if you do desperately need souls, you can't cast Soul Collection. You can then use those souls into skeleton reanimation. Skeletons have become more powerful since I last did this sort of video. Skeletons, in particular, the skeleton militia has gotten up to 60 HP. That I thought he actually had more now. No, just 60 HP? Yeah, I guess 60 HP. So, 60 HP on the skeleton militia is pretty tanky compared. I think in the past he had like 50. Skeleton warrior is still up here. I mean, he's a bit squishy, but what are you gonna do? Skeleton mage, skeleton archer, they haven't received changes. Now what has received changes is all skeleton units. You can see this on all of them over here. Once they get to champion rank, they get resurgence, meaning that if they die in a battle, they come back with 50% of their health. And that's on all of them here. Every single skeleton has that. So once you do get skeletons and once you do get them ranked up a little bit, they will be significantly tankier than they were previously because they'll just have resurgence. So they won't, like if you win a battle but they died in the battle, they'll just come back in a way that does make them tankier, because that means you can also sacrifice them, just throw them into an enemy, let them die, because if you win the battle, they just come back at half HP, right? Okay, Rotting Explosion I don't think is particularly good. Target friendly zombie or skeleton unit explodes. All enemies in a 2 hex radius take 20 damage and suffer 2 decaying. Now this causes souls to cast. I don't think this one is the greatest or most powerful one. This does have some synergy with the new vampires because they have the corpse explosion ability. So you can blow up a zombie, then explode its corpse, and you can do that automatically with this. So there is some synergy there, but I just don't think it's that much. Necrotic projectiles is also, I don't think, terribly good. Get a 90% chance to inflict decaying on battle mages, supports, ranges, and skirmishers. If you want to get decaying on skirmishers, you can get that from Blades of Decay from Tome of Cycles, and that just automatically applies decaying, which I think is just better. And on other people, I don't think that Tome of Necromancy leads to a very powerful Battle Mage build. You could try to do a Battle Mage build starting with Tome of Necromancy, but I just don't think that that route is terribly good. So Necrotic Projectiles tends to be the odd man out here. If you do go undead, a lot of people prefer Mythics. So it's just generally you don't really need Necrotic Projectiles. The Necromancer himself is also not terribly good. I wouldn't really recommend using the Necromancer either. Now you might say, well, I just called three things in this tome bad. The Necromancer here, you can see he does have 18 damage, which is a pretty good chunk of damage, but he has no special effects on it. He can't get mounted, so he's stuck over here at 32 movement speed, which is not good. He can raise undead, but it's restricted to only being used once per battle. He does have strength and undead, and he did get a change where at champion rank, his strength and undead heals 15 hit points, so that's okay. But in all, these are just not really that amazing. I think if raise undead maybe had like a cooldown 2 or 3, maybe if he had 40 movement speed or could at least be mounted. But overall, it's just really hard to fit a Necromancer into this sort of build. Skeletons themselves are already going to be pretty slow, but skeletons, you don't really care if they live or die. They're mostly just used to help you clear out the map early. Spending your souls to get a Necromancer, that's a bit of a big ask. Now, there is one clever trick you can do with the Tome of Necromancy. If you do kill a hero, particularly from your free city, if you kill a hero of your race, if you are maybe a tyrant, Dark Tyranny, you can get an additional hero when you vassalize a city of your race. Then you can execute them. Then you can raise them from the dead with souls. Then what you can do, because you have those extra souls in the early game, you now get an extra Whiteborn hero, and you can use him to help you clear the map, because now he'll have lifesteal. So that's just one little trick you can do with Tome of Necromancy. Otherwise, I'm just going to call it an A tier tome. It's got a really good, like an outrageously good spell here, an outrageously good early game tempo here, a pretty good SPI here. Decrepit Projectiles isn't bad, it's just like, it's okay. Rotting Explosion does have some synergy with vampires. Soul Collection is, yeah, some people use it. I don't terribly like it. It's mostly just that the Tome of Necromancy gets you really good early clearing, some good early game soul generation, and can potentially get you a hero that will be Whiteborn early on, allowing you early clearing. Now, this brings us to Tome of Cryomancy, which I think was S tier and is still S tier. Now, the reason Tome of Cryomancy is S tier is because you see a lot of these sorts of tomes, right? Frost arrows, frost blades, right? If we go to Chaos, we can see Tome of Pyromancy has searing blades, fiery arrows. Now, what makes Tome of Pyromancy a tome that almost never sees play, and what makes Tome of Cryomancy an S tier tome is very simple: the School of Cryomancy. Now, School of Cryomancy is a research post that gives you more knowledge. Then, if you happen to have snow or ice provinces, which aren't as rare as you'd think, you can then generate a good bit of mana on it as well. So we have a research post SPI on a tome that is already a high damage tome, giving you frost blades, giving you frost arrows. Then, in addition to that, we get a decent combat spell, not amazing, but a decent combat spell, and a world map spell that scales throughout the entire game. Blizzard is outrageously useful in the early game, and it's still outrageously useful in the late game. It never falls off. We've also got a pretty good summon here. It's a skirmisher. Now, it does have a cooldown 2 on its ranged attack, but with a 30% chance to freeze enemies. If you spam these guys, you can get, a decent chance to freeze. If you don't freeze, you give them status vulnerability, so then maybe someone else can freeze them. So just as compared to any of the other Blade tomes, this one peaks ahead pretty hard. The only other ones that could potentially come close is you went Tome of Roots and we're trying to rush into somebody, and then you could use Vine Prison to try to rush damage into them. I don't know, something like that. But then again, you can see Tome of Roots, they don't have as good an SPI as the Tome of Cryomancy, and they just don't have as good scaling, because while Vine Prison is pretty decent in the early game, Blizzard scales better because it's a world map spell. You can just slap onto someone's army, give them -3 status resist the entire game. So yeah, Tome of Cryomancy has the typical Blade tome drawback. A lot of these Blade tomes do this, and I don't know why they do this, where they give you a battle mage, but then the frost arrows doesn't actually buff battle mages. So if I'm going to do a battle mage build, I'm not actually going to be using White Witch. White Witch herself is not particularly that great on her own. Her main ability is Freezing Blast. It's a range 4 1 AP ability. It's a pretty good ability. It does allow you to freeze enemies. She does get frost bolts here. They don't have any special effects on them. Other than that, there's nothing I need to look into. There's no special attributes of this unit that are worth noting. She's just an battle mage in a tome that doesn't buff battle mages. But overall, we're just going to call the Tome of Cryomancy S tier. Just really, really, really good. Now, Tome of Bloodright, I'm going to call this one an A tier tome. Some people think it's B tier, but I think it's just a well-constructed tome that is really, really strong, and I've liked using it. It does have some drawbacks, and it does have some things that you kind of need to jank together to make work, for sure. So if you're not using bleed, if you don't have a way for your melee to get bleed, then Blood Drinking Blades is just an enchant that does half the damage of a normal enchant. If you don't have a way to get bleed, then Flesh Carved Runes is just some world map, and that's about it. You can combo this with Tome of Rock and get your melee to have bleed. Alternatively, you can use Sanguine Focus to give people bleed. Let's talk about what the tome does as a whole. I'm just talking about why people say it's not that good. As a whole, I would say this tome gets you 6 options, of which 3 of them are pretty good. Now, I do think Tome of Bloodright has some weird attributes. I have noticed this in my games. I've not asked if this is intended or if this will be changed. We do start with Rite of Bloodletting and Rite of Why can't I say that? Rite of Bloodletting and Rite of Life Leeching. It's the L's. The L's are just like breaking my brain. Both of these, I did start with these unlocked. So I actually had both of these unlocked, and then I had to choose through these. That happened to me a lot, and I think that's intended, which makes this tome a little bit better than you'd think. But let's look into it. Okay, number one. We do have a special performance improvement that gives us draft income. Draft income is not that amazing. We do get 5 drafts per adjacent farm. You can typically get 20 draft out of this SPI. Now, it is a conduit, which isn't that great either, but it does have the unique effect. Whenever you win a battle, you get 10 mana. This is really, really good for when you're clearing the map and taking lots of fights, and for a tome that specializes in healing, which we'll get into later. It allows you to continue to take fight, which then allows Blood Altar to generate a lot of mana. So Blood Altar can be deceptively very good. Our 2 combat spells here are Rite of Bloodletting. A unit sustains 5 unblockable damage, then all enemies within 2 hexes get 2 bleeding and suffer 10 physical damage. That's pretty good for getting bleeding onto enemies for your blood drinking blades, which again we'll get into in a second. But overall, it doesn't scale that well, but it is only 10 mana, and yeah, it's pretty good for that perspective. Rite of Blood Leeching. This one is also a bit hard. I would say this one's a harder one to use. Target unit sustains 5 physical damage, and then adjacent, not the unit you hit, but adjacent friendly units then get strengthened and lifesteal. Now, this lifesteal can be very, very impactful. The only problem with both of these rights is I don't think if you do auto battles that the AI is particularly good. I don't trust it with Rite of Life Leeching at all, but if you're manually playing out your battles, then I think both of these will do pretty good. Blood Drinking Blades gives your melee units +1 physical damage, doubled on single shots, and then whenever you strike a unit with bleeding, you heal for 2 temporary hit points. So you're giving up 1 damage to heal potentially for 2 on bleeding enemies. This is pretty decent for the early game, but I would say the main advantage of this tome comes down to the combo of Blood Drinking Blades and Sanguine Focus. Now, Sanguine Focus affects battle mages and supports and gives them 1 physical damage and a 60% chance of inflicting bleeding. This means if you are running an early to mid game build that is comboing battle mages and melee, these battle mages and melee can both get buffed out of the same tome. The only other one that does that off the top of my head, I think, is the Tome of Evocation. Tome of Evocation does have the lightning focused lightning blades. These will deal more damage and I think scale a bit better because this one gives you more damage against electrified enemies, and this one gives you just double the damage. But the Tome of the Bloodright does have some advantages as well, in that we get a pretty decent minor race transformation. This gives you 5 hit points regeneration on your entire race, and all attacks and debuff abilities ignore 1 status resist per stack of bleeding. So if we do get some debuffs later on, then we can more consistently apply these debuffs later on. This gives it really good synergy with the Dark Tyranny. Dark Tyranny with Warlocks are pretty good at proccing Sanguine Focus, at using Flesh Current Runes. So these are good units to set up your bleeds. We do have some good synergy as we get later and later into the game. As we get maybe some tier 4 battle mages, things like Geomancers. If you're trying to do shield units or something like that in front of Geomancers, the Geomancers can spam AoEs because this just affects all magic attacks, which means that it will affect their AoEs as well, or its AoEs will get a chance of bleeding. So it's a very well constructed tome that very much synergizes with itself, and it has a decent SPI here. So I'd call this an A tier tome. Some people might disagree with me. That takes us to the Blood Cultist. Now, the Blood Cultist I don't think is very good. He's definitely no Warlock. We do have 32 movement speed, but he does have an optional mount, so that's pretty easy to do. His basic ability is Hemorrhaging Bolts. That's just 12 damage, no ability to do anything there. But we do have here Scarlet Plague. Target enemy suffers damage and gains 2 blood parasites. Now, the blood parasites can be argued to be pretty good, and I think that they can be pretty good. But I would say that one of the best ways to use Tome of the Bloodright is in Dark Tyranny. If you're not playing Dark Tyranny, then the Blood Cultist is a decent enough battle mage to get into your builds. Blood Parasite will count as bleeding if you're worried. So yeah, it replaces and counts bleeding. And if someone dies while under Blood Parasite, you'll get a Blood Maggot. This allows you to snowball the board down, and it allows you to just continue to keep winning, I guess is the best way to put it. So he's pretty good from that perspective. We do have one problem here, the Dagger of the Right. Dagger of the Right has... the caster suffers 5 unblockable physical damage, then gets 60% damage, then gains Resurgence, then dies at the end of the turn. If you ever do auto battles, your Blood Cultists love to kill themselves. They're very emo like that. I mean, they kind of look emo, right? Overall, I mean... I prefer Warlock, and I find Dark Tyranny synergizes best with this tome, but Blood Cultist is a research you can do. He is an alternative, and if you are trying to use Scarlet Plagues, then it's just a good way to get those blood maggots out onto the field, and then those blood maggots will then get enchanted by everything that you're doing. So there is some synergy here, there is some stuff you can do, but he's not a bad unit. I think I said he was a bad unit. He's not a bad unit. I just find that the alternatives are... I mean, the alternative being Warlock is a bit better. If you're doing high, then I think you'd probably want to skip over the Blood Cultists and just start stacking Awakeners. If you're doing a Battle Mage build with no good tier 2 Battle Mage, then yes, Blood Cultist is okay. He just might frustrate you with the way he kills himself in auto battles. And even though he has Resurgence, that means that your Blood Cultist is going to go from full HP to half HP, which is just going to be frustrating if you're fighting a really easy battle. So this takes us to the Tome of the Tentacle, which I'm going to call a C-tier tome. I don't think there's realistically anything good about this tome, and I think it would actually be a D-tier tome in all fairness, but it does have some advantages to it. We see exactly why Tome of the Bloodright is so good and Tome of the Tentacle is so bad. We have no SPI here. We do get a pretty good polearm unit, but we don't actually buff polearms within this tome. Instead, we get Constricting Focus. Constricting Focus affects battle mages and supports to have a 30% chance, makes base magic attacks of enchanted units have a 30% chance of inflicting constricted. So that doesn't affect their AoEs, because all their AoEs are not considered base. That chance is increased to 60% against marked and slowed enemies. So there is some hypothetical synergy here with Reavers, but not really. So Constricting Focus is going to be hard to use. It's pretty RNG on whether or not it procs. Sometimes you might get some good procs on it and you'll feel like, oh my god, this is amazing. And sometimes you'll get bad procs and you'll think, ugh. The Constrictor itself is a pretty decent polearm unit. Again, tier 2, 80 HP, 14. If it was 40, it'd be better, wouldn't it? 14 damage, 60% chance to constrict on its attacks, so that's pretty good. Constricting is like immobilized, but it also takes 10 damage, so constricting is way better. We do get an ability here, Pull, which is 3 range, has a 90% chance of pulling an enemy unit and constricting them, so that's a pretty good ability as well. All in all, I would say the Constrictor is good, but the tome doesn't support Constrictors at all. We have a pretty decent combat spell here as well, the Conjure Tentacle. Now, you conjure the tentacle down, it runs behind enemies, and it flanks them. Then you go bam, 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 hit them in the back 3 times, 60% chance to constrict, with a 90% chance to constrict against marked or slowed enemies. Again, potentially synergy with Reavers, but I really wouldn't. The chance to constrict, if you are marked or slowed somehow, you did that, then that's pretty good. Constricting Focus doesn't affect range units, though. There might be some hypothetical synergy here with maybe Glade Runners, if you could, but it doesn't affect range units, so you literally can't. Retaliating Growths is a pretty decent combat spell here. It target friendly unit gains Retaliating Growth, so it does affect 2 turns, not just 1. They get a 60% chance to constrict enemies with all their base attacks. They get unlimited retaliation attacks. They get hyper awareness, and they get defensive masters. Now, defensive masters puts you in defense mode at the end of your turn. So this is hypothetically quite good. If you do use retaliating growths, you can make your melee lords, particularly if there's some sort of healing, you can make your melee lords effectively take almost unlimited battles, as they can just run through enemies and just have unlimited retaliations, constrict enemies, do big battles, or do big damage. So potentially we could have some like Dark Tyranny. Again, I keep saying Dark Tyranny, but there's a lot of Dark Tyranny synergy. Dark Tyranny could use retaliating growths on maybe a warrior hero to take like unlimited battles and just use it on them. But I mean, that's like it. That's like the only thing I'm seeing from this tome that's like particularly amazing. They do get a unique city structure, the Tendril Labyrinth. So instead of getting an SPI, you have to research this. Gives you 10 gold, 10 stability. Not too bad, realistically. Then, when besieged, you conquer 3 tentacle units adjacent to enemies when you start the battle. Now, this doesn't affect the whole domain. This only affects the siege. So don't think this is some magical domain. Like, you can slap this down in a city, and all of a sudden, the city is just going to be absolutely amazing. But the city will be, of course, a bit hard to siege due to those 3 tentacles being a bit strong. Sorry, I'm like... Ugh, my mouth is drying out so quickly. This takes us to the Tome of Shades. Now, I'm going to call Tome of Shades a C-tier tome. Despite the fact that I think Tome of Shades is like S+ tier when combined into some builds, like Pyre Templars. If you're wondering why Pyre Templars is so outrageously good, you know, I forget what that unit is called, like every single time. If you're wondering why Pyre Templars is so outrageously good, Shrine of Smiting, there we go. With Tome of Shades, it's this guy here, Shrine of Smiting. You might be wondering, well, that doesn't make any sense. How Shrine of Smiting? It's because of Divine Vengeance. Divine Vengeance automatically applies blind to all enemies in a 2-hex radius. So as we read here through the Tome of Blades, do note that some builds can automatically apply the blind, and that doesn't even have a resist chance, which makes Tome of Shades synergize outrageously well with those builds, while in other builds, it's merely okay. I'm not going to call Tome of Shades a bad tome. I just think that if you were doing Tome of Shades without some way to make use of it eventually, that you might be disappointed. But the main thing is Shadow Blades. This is a buff for your melee units. You ignore 50% of defense and resistance against blinded enemies, which is really, really, really strong if you can blind enemies automatically. Otherwise, your only other real way to blind enemies are Living Shadows. There's a minor race transformation that gives your entire race 10% evasion, and then whenever they are attacked within 2 hexes, the attacker has a 60% chance of becoming blind. Our other way here is Rending Shadows, a spell that in AoE 1 does 16 damage, 90% chance to blind, and 90% chance to sunder defense. So if we're using a normal unit, if we're not using the Shade, we'll go over the Shade in a second, but if we're using a normal build, these are 3 ways to use and blind enemies, and you can see they're not particularly amazing, particularly as we start looking into later end units like Mythics. The chance of Living Shadows actually proccing the blind on them is not too great. Yeah. The Shade Network is a special building. It gives your city 10 knowledge income and then 10 more knowledge income for a non-owned city that shares a border. Now, I do believe that you can put these onto free cities and stuff like that, so you can get like a good 20 knowledge on that. It's not too bad from that perspective. It's just more knowledge. Knowledge is good, but if you're trying to go this tome for knowledge, there's much, much, much better tomes for knowledge. I would just say overall, it's just not terribly amazing. It's not bad, it's just not terribly amazing if you can't have a good way to blind enemies from other tomes. The Shade unit itself is... for some reason, it has 1 less resistance than normal. I'm not sure why. The Assassin unit is weaker into battle mages, but this does affect its ability to actually win fights because it has 1 less resistance than normal. I'm not sure why it does that. Otherwise, this is just a tier 3 skirmisher. We do have Throw Shadow Dagger. This gives it a 90% chance to blind enemies at range, for range. This is not an automatic hit ability. Blind is certainly a bit weaker than Stun from the Inquisitor, so I think the Inquisitor is probably the better skirmisher unit if you're going for it. Does like that resistance, as I keep saying. It has Fatal Strike. Now, Fatal Strike is a 25 damage ability. It's a single shot, so we don't have a multi-attack on this, and its damage is increased based on the target's lost hit points. So Fatal Strike is a pretty decent way to kind of like, I guess the idea here is you like poke at enemies and then you run in and like stab them, maybe go for like a flanking hit, stab them, do bonus damage, and kabam, I guess, right? We do have Shadowed Escape. When its hit points drop below 30%, you inflict blind on all adjacent enemy units and you teleport 5 hexes in a random direction, which should actually be 5 hexes away, I believe. So that's kind of like a decent way to use it. Overall, this is not like an unplayable unit. It's just not particularly a great unit. And I have seen some people build them in funny builds, but realistically, I would probably not use that. So that's it for Tome of Shades. Tome of Doom Herald. Doom Herald, I'm torn. This is either an S tier tome or an A tier tome, depending on what your build is doing and what you're doing. There are builds. I mean, overall, I would say Doom Herald is like an A tier tome. And overall, I would say in like the right builds, it's like S tier. Just like, oh my god. That's because morale bombing has become more and more common in Shadow Tomes. Whereas before, the only real way to morale bomb was to go Doom Herald into... He's now called the Subjugator, but he used to be called the Tyrant Knight. Now there's so much support for morale bombing that Tome of the Doom Herald is looking pretty strong, because if you combo it with any way to morale bomb enemies, you can drive them from the field very, very easily due to some of the things it does. We do have an SPI here, a conduit that gives you 10 mana, 10 knowledge, and 3 mana and 3 knowledge for each alignment level below neutral. This means if you go pretty evil, then you can get, I believe that's 9 mana, 9 knowledge, for in total 19 mana, 19 knowledge. That's pretty good. But you do get -5 city stability, and that would require you to go pure evil. The main reason this tome is so strong and frustrating to fight is the Prelude to Doom. Target enemy army gets 3 demoralized for 1 turn. Now this is an uncleansable 15 morale reduction. So right when you start a battle, an army can already have -15 morale. And you can't cleanse it or anything, because morale gain is so rare that when you combo Prelude to Doom with other sources of morale bombing or morale reduction, Prelude to Doom just sets you up for enemies to, on the very first turn of combat, already be in a position to start routing, which is a bit frustrating. The second reason this tome is so good is Joy Siphoners. The entire race deals 4 morale damage per hit. Now that does ignore any resist. There's no resist chance on this. You just steal 4 morale damage. As you can imagine, Prelude to Doom, Joy Siphoners, you can get some pretty nasty stuff with this already. But in its own, Doom Herald was not breaking the game. It's just when we start looking at the further Shadow Tomes, you'll start seeing all these sources of morale damage that they've done that have kind of stacked up over time. We have Cause Despair, which is an AoE 1, 90% chance of losing 15 morale. That's pretty decent, but, I mean, you do have a chance to resist it, but if it does hit, we are getting to the point where we can start we can get enemies to start routing without much effort. Cruel Weaponry gives your race 30% more damage against, or sorry, gives enchanted units, not race, 30% more damage against enemies with low morale. I don't think this one's particularly amazing, because the general idea should be routing enemies, not getting them to low morale, then beating them to death. But I would still use it, right? There's no reason not to use it, because if you do get enemies to low morale and kill them, that can cause a cascading rout effect. Summon Corrupt Soul is not very good. He is a summon. If we look over here, he is a summon. He does count as an undead ethereal. Undead ethereals, instead of getting -8 spirit resist, only get -4 now. They don't double up on it. They were a bit beneficial to them. Unfortunately, that's still -4 fire and -4 spirit resist, which is pretty brutal. I mean, that's just typical undead, right? We do get the 2 bonus defense from being an ethereal unit. So you do have 95-3 against physical damage. He's looking pretty good. Now, I do believe he is floating, so he can kind of just float around the battlefield. 32 movement speed only, though, is pretty rough. His main advantage is the melee strike that morale drains enemies. Your entire race will also get this morale drain from the Doom Herald minor race transformation. So this isn't very unique, His unique ability is Crushing Anguish. Target unit with morale of low or worse has a chance of dying instantly, blah 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 blah. This is 3 AP and has a decent chance, but often you would, I mean, it's not a bad ability, it's just, We do have the Armor of Despair. For each morale level an attacker has below neutral, this unit gains a defense resist. So if enemies do have low morale, he's already at 1 defense, 1 resist, that'd make him pretty tanky. The obvious downsides here, he's a non-racial unit, so he doesn't get form traits. He's pretty slow. And again, if you use the minor race transformation, then morale drain's not that amazing to begin with. I mean, he's somewhat usable, but I would probably not try to use him myself. So Tome of the Doom Herald is just really, really, really good when combined with other stuff. That brings us to Tome of Souls, which I think is probably the weakest Shadow Tome in the game right now. Tome of Souls got a big nerf and never got any adjustments to make it worth using. Even if you're trying to do an undead build, even if you're trying to do a soul build, I just don't think that this one is very good. Now, to start with, we have no SPI over here, so that's not good. We do have Soul Binders. This is another buff for battle mages and supports. Unfortunately, I just don't think that undead battle mages, they do have at the end in their tier 5, we've got like this big boost for battle mages. I just don't see undead battle mages being a realistically viable build, but we do have more support for it. This gives all your battle mages and supports a 90% chance to soulbound enemies. Soulbounded enemies give you 2 more souls when they die, and have a 30% chance of becoming a decaying zombie when they die, and those are pretty good. Then you do 10% more damage against units with soulbound. It's okay. There's better enchants in the game, but we have a little bit more support for battle mages. We do get Feast of Souls. Now, this one is not very good for one particular reason. You're spending 20 souls. Souls are going to be very rare at this point in the game, and you're spending 20 of them to heal non-undead units in an army for 20, and to heal undead units for 40. That's not a great use of your souls. In a pinch, this can help. Before a big battle, this can help, but I would not just be slapping this down willy-nilly just to help clear the map. Soul Overflow is okay. Now, this does give you 1 strengthened and increases your max hit points by 20, and does a cleanse on 2 different status debuffs. So this is definitely something that I think is worth grabbing, because in a pinch you can use this as a little AoE cleanse helper, which can definitely be helpful. It does gives you max hit points, which can be helpful, but again, this is using souls. As you can see, we have no real way to generate souls because we're only on tier 2. We have Tome of Necromancy, which can give us soul well, and potentially we could pay 30 gold upkeep to get 10 souls. And then Tome of Souls over here is asking us to pay 20 for this one, and then it's asking us to pay 15 for this one, and it's like, oh man. The only way we have to generate souls is with soul binders, which is not going to be terribly reliable, and we might not even have battle mages or supports left in our army at this point if we've been clearing and relying on skeletons. That brings us to Bone Horror Reanimation. The reason this is no good is the Bone Horror unit itself is no good and costs 70 souls now. It was increased from 50 to 70. For some reason, it has -1 resist. Again, I don't know why. It's a non-racial unit, so it doesn't get any of the form trait buffs. Nothing it does is particularly good. Now, it does have Corpse Gauge. So the first time it reaches 50% HP or lower, it summons a decaying zombie. Now, that is somewhat helpful to get more bodies onto the battlefield. There's a lot of undead things that synergize with all these bodies. We do see that it does get the Consume Corpse, so you can free action kill bodies. Now that's kind of useful to kill opposing bodies, or to just deny opponents being able to do stuff, or to just heal 30. So from that perspective, it's okay. It's a Demolisher, it can destroy Fortified. I don't know why it's got low maintenance. I guess because it's understat, but I'd rather, if I'm paying 70 souls for a unit, I don't want it to be low maintenance. I want it to be high maintenance. I want it to be a devastating unit. And the Bone Horror is particularly at 32 movement speed is not devastating. I would not summon this in anything other than like a desperation situation. And when we look at Summon Banshee as well, Summon Banshee also wants us to use souls. I don't know where we're possibly getting all these souls. Summon Banshee's main ability here is the cruel. We have cruel bolts, which it's just a typical battle mage, deal 14 damage, get cruel effect on it, and then we have Wail of the Banshee. This is its main ability. Enemy units in a 2 hex radius have a 90% chance of having the morale reduced by 10 and becoming 2 weakened on top of 10 damage. It's got the phase ability here, which it can use to phase into the middle of an enemy formation and use Wail of the Banshee. The Banshee itself, there's no real point to look into it. We're not very tanky. This is a battle mage unit with 90 HP, which I think is above average, but once again, non-racial. Racial units I don't think could get this tanky on a battle mage, so this is a very tanky battle mage, right? But overall, 45 souls, potentially battle mage could be, or potentially Banshee could be usable if it wasn't for that 45 souls that were being asked, because we don't have a great way to have like a great souls upkeep, or I should say great souls economy yet. We're only at tier 2, and as you can see here, like, this is all souls. The only way to generate souls in this tome is soul binders, and so I don't think this tome like ever gets picked. It's just not very good. Tome of Torment, this is a new one. I'm gonna call this an A tier tome. Depending on some of the balance changes it gets, it could go from S tier to A tier. It did get one hit on the beta, where tormenting projectiles went to a 90% chance to hit enemies instead of an automatic hit. I'm hoping they buff it to give battle mages a little bit more damage. That's because battle mages are not particularly dominating the meta, and I do think tormenting projectiles needed a nerf. So what does tormenting projectiles do? It inflicts torment on enemies. Tome of Torment. What does torment do? Whenever a unit uses an ability, it takes 8 unpreventable frost damage, loses 4 morale, and then loses an effect of, or loses 1 stack. It targets Grace. Now torment typically gets applied in stacks of like 2 to 4, whereas Grace gets applied in stacks of like 1 to 2. So torment encountering Grace, there will be so much more torment than Grace that if you're fighting anyone with torment, you basically can no longer use Grace. Grace is just gone. So the reason I think this could be buffed a little bit, when you could summon extra units onto the field, like a lot of undead builds could summon tier 1 skeletons. It's like a big thing. The who's that dude? The Undead Titan can do it. The Rose Knight can do it. Grave Gall can do it. There's lots of ways to get tier 1 skeletons onto the field, and they will have a 1/2 chance of being a battle mage or a ranged skeleton. If they are a ranged skeleton and they got tormenting projectiles, they could hit an enemy 3 times, apply 3 torment, and this little tier 1 shitter, this little summon that you just ran down, applying 3 stacks of torment was devastating. It was outrageously difficult to fight. So on the open beta right now, it's reduced to 90% chance. Now, I think this should give +1 damage to battle mages, because battle mages are not particularly good right now. They're like mid-tier at best. And I think tormenting projectiles was really, really good for them being viable. It just obviously had the downside that it was really overpowered when just used in summon spam builds. Because you can imagine, if your hero gets 3 stacks of torment on them, and then on their turn, they use 3 abilities, and attacks are abilities. If they use 3 abilities on their turn and take 24 damage and 12 morale damage, that's ridiculous for a tier 1 unit to have been able to apply that with no status penetration. So like, holy crap. Yeah, but I do think it should have +1 damage, just to, because you do see the theme here. They are trying to push shadow battle mages a little bit, at least. Okay. Now that brings us to Agonize. Agonize is why this tome is very frustrating for a lot of people. Agonize is like crazy strong. Other tier 3 tomes do about 30 damage on combat spells. Agonize does 40 damage. Then it has a 90% chance to apply 3 stacks of torment, and on a failure, it inflicts 1 stack. Now, the fact is, you can rush into Torment, quick grab Agonize, and you can have Agonize when the majority of units you'll be fighting are tier 1s and tier 2s, maybe a couple tier 3s. There won't be that high status resist. So if you can slap Agonize and maybe hit 3 units, and then you do 40 damage, and then they can take 24 unpreventable damage, that's a lot of damage, and it also debuffs their morale as well. It is very hard to fight back against someone who tempoed into Agonize and just spams it every turn. It's very, very strong. We do have a minor race transformation here. I do think this one's pretty good. It's a bit out of theme for Shadow to get morale. I think Torment should have been Chaos Shadow because that would have worked better in my opinion. Some of these effects are very chaosy. Torment is kind of like a Shadow take on Misfortune in my opinion. And I just think that this tome would have been better and more thematic if it was Chaos Shadow, because then I could justify to myself, why does a Shadow tome have morale gain? Shadow is all morale loss, and now they have morale gain. Okay, but Painbound, minor race transformation. Target race embraces pain, and when hit by an attack, gain 2 morale and a random positive status effect. So I think that's pretty good. Obviously. If you're using tanky melee, this is very good. Undead love to have tanky melee, so this is just direct perfect synergy with them. Just good. It's just, it's easy to explain as a minor race transformation. It's pretty good. That brings us to Painbringer. Now, Painbringer has had some people complain about them. I think they could eat a little nerf, but they do have some downsides. This is a racial mythic unit, so you cannot enchant it, but you can transform it, which I think is a first. What Painbringer seems to be is a very, very tanky frontliner for Battle Mage builds. This does make Tome of Torment really, really, really good for Battle Mage builds, as you might imagine, because we now have a really tanky frontliner that we can slap in front of all our Battle Mages in the back. So Painbringer, due to being a mythic, is pretty tanky. 140 HP, 5/5 stats, and it's racial, so it gets those form traits. That's pretty good. We are stuck down here at 32 movement speed, which isn't great, but we can still work with that. Now, what Painbringer has as her unique things here are Draining Strike. She will deal 20 damage repeating and then heal 50% of the damage dealt. She also has Flanker, so she does 25% more damage when flanking. Her special ability is Tormenting Lash, a 3-range ability, still with Flanker, that if it hits, inflicts 4 stacks of torment on the enemy with no chance to resist, which is pretty strong. We have Shadow Step, which is on cooldown 2. This is merely a 2-range teleport, but this can be used to teleport behind you and then hit you in the back with flanking attacks over and over, or to run up to enemies and get right into range of their melee units so that you can beat the hell out of them. You can't use Tormenting Lash in melee, but you can Shadow Step back into a Tormenting Lash if you're trying to, tank melee lines. So there is some stuff here. She does have Control Loss Immunity due to being a mythic unit, Flanker, Hyper Awareness, so she cannot herself be flanked, and she's Watchful, so she gets +1 Retaliate. So it does seem the general idea here on Painbringer is that if you're doing a Battle Mage build that needs a frontline, we've got the Painbringer. Okay. So, in addition to all that goodies, we also have the Lens of Anguish, which is a city structure that can only be built in your capital. That gives you 5 mana, 10 combat casting. That's decent. But then we have damage spells and debuff spells apply an additional 5 morale loss. That 5 morale loss can't be resisted. So, Tome of Torment ends up being a pretty strong tome, I would say. This is a pretty strong Tome of Torment. We have the Basilica of Lamentation over here, which is its SPI. There's a pretty decent SPI. 10 mana, 10 knowledge, 10 city stability. That's pretty good, obviously. Then it gives 3 mana per adjacent farm and 2 knowledge per adjacent forester. Those are whatever. I would say the main aspect here is the 10 mana, 10 knowledge, 10 city stability. That's a pretty good SPI. So I would say the Tome of Torment is either an S tier or an A tier. I would call it an A tier for now, because I don't know if there's going to be any further balancing on it. And if there's no balancing, I would call this probably an S tier tome. If there is some balancing, potentially some nerfs on Lens of Anguish, automatic 5 morale loss reduction, which is absurd, then it'll probably go down to being A. There's no way it's below an A tier. I would call this a high A tier at worst. It's just a very well constructed, very powerful tome. Yeah. Tome of Corruption. Now, Tome of Corruption is, I'm going to call this a B tier tome. It is very, very strong, but it has to be used, in my opinion, in a tempo. It does some things that are very unique and very strong and can win the game on their own. What are those things? Okay. So number 1, we have Umbral Incursion. Target enemy city loses a borderland province, the population is lost, and you spawn an Umbral nest infestation. These sorts of spells are decent, not great, but decent. If you're attacking free cities, you can spam this on the free city, then clear your own infestation to get more equipment, experience, loot from that. So I think Umbral Incursion is actually pretty good at that. That's basically what it's good for. A lot of people don't like these sorts of spells, but they do have that one use. You can farm your own infestations to get some loot from that. Gloomstrider is the racial transformation. You become an umbral demon floating and you get fast movement. Unfortunately, you lose your mount and you lose your mount and leg equipment slots, which isn't great. The umbral demon unit type gives you -2 fire resist, -2 spirit resist, immunity to umbral malady, but you do get Curse Eater. Curse Eater is, at the start of every turn, you lose 1 random negative status effect and heal 10 hit points. But it gets turned off if you're burning. The obvious downside here with Gloomstrider is burning is weirdly common and yet uncommon, because if anyone is using Pyre Templars, you will always be burning. However, if people aren't playing Pyre Templars, you will generally not be burning that often. So it's a bit awkward, because if you fight some builds, then Gloomstrider is just a debuff, and if you don't fight some builds, then Gloomstrider is very, very strong. It can make you quite frustrating to deal with, but the loss of that leg equipment kind of sucks. Overall, I'm going to call it a mid-tier evolution. Now, floating and fast movement is okay, but waiting until a tier 3 tome to get fast movement would kind of suck for your tempo. I would not recommend that. So I would say that's kind of its biggest drawback as well, is that this fast movement 99% of the time does nothing, because most people will just actually ignore it. Like, they'll just take athletics, or they'll take mount masters anyway to move faster, and then they get fast movement, which is like, okay. Throne of Insidious Whispers is pretty good. 15 mana income, 15 world map casting, 15 combat casting. Those things are really good. Then any combat within the city's domain, 3 enemy units have a 90% chance of suffering from insanity for 1 turn and otherwise get stunned. So this is a pretty good way to defend your throne city, and even if you're not defending your throne city, that's just a lot of world map and combat casting. Combat casting isn't the most useful for shadow builds, because they'll always have death magic anyway, but if you're not doing a shadow build, if you don't have death magic, then this is a pretty decent way to get more combat casting. Even if you do have death magic, then it still has the world map casting points, and those are pretty good. The main 2 advantages of this tome, well, I would say the 3 main advantages of the tome are the Summon Umbral Mistress, Corrupted Boon, and Treacherous Reflection. Corrupted Boon full purges an enemy unit, and then for every buff they had, they get a debuff. This is primarily useful for when an enemy is like 5 bolster defense, 5 bolster resist. You Corrupted Boon, and they swing going from +5 resist to -5 resist. That's a -10 resist swing. This is outrageously good at killing heroes, and it can also be used in a pinch to remove things like Steadfast. If you could kill a hero and they were steadfasted, then you kill them, Corrupted Boon them, do that last little hit. So Corrupted Boon is a bit versatile, and it's just really good for wiping out heroes. Treacherous Reflection, you create a treacherous reflection of target unit. Can't be used on heroes, combat summons, and mythic units. This is pretty good. Now, its obvious downside is you can't use it on mythics or heroes, so as we get later and later into the game, it gets weaker and weaker, but against racial builds, this gets pretty good. Treacherous Reflection is a copy of another unit, a complete and total copy, except it's also an umbral demon. The reflection dies when the enemy unit dies. The main way to use this is to spam it on people in the back, maybe battle mages if you're fighting a battle mage build, or maybe a charge unit, and then like charge other units in the back, stuff like that. And then you can just use Treacherous Reflection to spam on enemy. It's just good tempo in a battle, particularly if you rushed into Corrupted Boon. If you rushed into Tome of Corruption for Corrupted Boon and Treacherous Reflection, so this is your first tier 3 tome, 4 tomes into Tome of Corruption. Treacherous Reflection is pretty brutal to deal with when enemies aren't that tanky yet. If you copy a charge unit or a battle mage unit, or even like a triple attack unit, and you start hitting their own units with it, it's pretty rough to deal with. The last advantage here is the Umbral Mistress, which has definitely been nerfed over time. apparently she doesn't show up in a tome unit, which is odd. This unit definitely has gotten weaker over time, but is still a pretty deadly unit. It's a tier 4 mythic unit, 110 HP, 5/5. What is her main advantage then? She is very, very complicated, but the general idea here is she tries to enchant Mind. Target enemy unit has a 120% base chance of becoming enchained. If they fail that check and they do become enchained, then she can use one of her 3 abilities automatically. And these cost no ability points. These will automatically hit. So linked unit suffers 30 physical damage that ignores defense, which is pretty strong. And you heal 30 hit points and you steal 3 positive status effects. So, Gratitude is pretty brutal because that can be used to potentially remove Steadfast or just debuff an enemy unit or just do a lot of damage and heal you, and makes Umbral Mistresses on a tempo play really rough to deal with. Fury is another one. If you fail that Enchained Mind, then you can automatically be inflicted with Insanity, which is a lot of crowd control to just make people straight go insane. Surrender is an automatic 20 morale damage and 3 standard defense and 3 standard resist. So this can be used if you do morale bomb people in some ways, then you can hit them with the surrender, and then another 20 morale loss is pretty brutal. Then we have Rack, which inflicts another -8 morale damage, 24 damage, -8 morale, and if the target is enchained, then it cannot miss. As you can imagine, Umbral Mistresses on a tempo play are really difficult to deal with. Until we start getting to tier 5 units, there's not really a whole lot that can stop Umbral Mistresses. The main disadvantage is the 32 movement speed. That was a big nerf they'd got. So I don't move across the map very big, but if you do summon them onto your army as you're about to attack another empire, they are very, very difficult to deal with. We do, of course, have the Umbral Curse Eater, so if you don't have fire damage, if we're not bringing in fire or spirit damage, then these units are 5/5 with 110 HP. They're like a mythic battle mage, so this unit is quite difficult to remove from the field. And then Curse Eater makes it even harder to remove from the field. We also have Umbral Dissolution. When it dies, it creates Umbral Taint around it. Umbral Taint is quite frustrating as well, because whenever a unit passes through or ends their turn on Umbral Taint, they take 5 morale damage and get a stack of decaying. So Umbral Taint makes it very rough to deal with Umbral Mistresses. Even if you run them down with melee and beat them down, then you get hit with the Umbral Taint, reducing morale, giving you decaying. Umbral Mistresses are just really, 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 really tough. They're a very, very powerful unit, and I would say that's probably the main reason. I would say there's 2 main reasons for Tome of Corruption being good. Corrupted Boon scales you a bit into the late game, and Umbral Mistress is just like an absurd tempo play. So I would definitely call this a B tier tome, but if you're on the receiving end of a Tome of Corruption tempo, or if you fight the AI, or somehow the AI manages to fight you with this, it can be, it can feel outrageously powerful. Tome of the Great Transformation. Now, I'm going to call this one's difficult to say. This is either B tier or A tier or S tier, depending on what you're doing. I would say it's never really quite in S tier, though, actually. But Tome of the Great Transformation is primarily aimed at giving you lots of souls generation within an undead build, but it also allows you to do a very big undead build. Tome of Great Transformation, in fact, I'm actually going to say it. I don't know why I'm calling it B tier. It's definitely an A tier tome. Yeah. I'll call Tome of Great Transformation A tier tome. Now, why is it so good then, in my opinion? The main advantage here is Desecrate Structure. You target a resource node within your domain, and then it provides 5 soul income for the rest of the game. This allows you to generate a lot of souls income. This allows you at tier 3 to finally start pushing out all those souls to use all your other stuff for the rest of the game. Particularly as you're looking at tier 4 tomes that will be using lots of souls, this is a tome that is going to prove invaluable for you. Whiteborn is the other main part of this tome. This gives you the undead unit type on your entire race, which allows you to proc the what is that hero ability? When you do the level 8 signature, it gives you the buff to undead units in your stack. You combo that with Whiteborn, and then your entire race has more HP, more damage. Then you get the undead, then you get lifesteal. So you just combo that with your heroes. It's just like a pretty good transformation. It's a bit basic because you just get undead and lifesteal. Undead can be seen as a bit of a downside, but it's pretty easy to get rid of that spirit and fire weakness, at which point it's just frost resist, blight resist, heartless, and immunity to disease and poison and lifesteal. So all these things just make you difficult to deal with. Fetid Legion is an enchantment that puts on all your melee units 10 hit points and Weakening Aura. Weakening Aura gives you weaken to all enemies at the end of your turn. So this helps remove their stacks of strengthened, and if they don't have stacks of strengthened, this can slowly whittle them out of dealing damage. Bone Dragon Reanimation summons a Bone Dragon. I'm sure you guys have fought Bone Dragons. They're quite tanky. They're quite frustrating. They're difficult to deal with. They've got Terrifying Aura, which automatically does 5 morale damage to enemies at the end of their turn. They also have the Putrid Bath. This is an AoE huge breath attack. Doesn't do insane damage, but does apply AoE to decaying, which is pretty brutal. And other than that, it just has, what is that, 29? That's 29 damage, yeah, on a triple attack ability that inflicts automatic poison. So the Bone Dragon, quite a devastating unit. If you have lots of souls and you want to tempo into a win, Bone Dragons are really, really, really good at that. Necrotic Spires is something you build in a city, and then when you do siege combat, instead of getting your towers, your what do you call that? Your ballistas or catapults, you get Necrotic Spires. Necrotic Spires seem to be a bit weird and buggy and are a bit annoying at times. Its cooldown 2 starts on cooldown, so every 3 turns, and you will get 4 of these. Each of these 4, every 3 turns, can summon Decaying Zombie. Target non-zombie corpse is resurrected as a Decaying Zombie on your side. So it's pretty useful for just being annoying in a battle to enemies. I wouldn't call it, like, it doesn't make sieges unlosable. I wouldn't even call it that amazing in a siege, but it's their own thing. Then also, all friendly undead units in this domain heal 12 hit points a turn, which is just a good way as we get later and later into the game to just heal your undead up, because, you know, as they start getting 100, 200 HP, the little bit of city healing you have might not be enough, so that just helps them out a little. Then we have Domain of Death. This is a world map casting spell. Target friendly city gets 20 city stability, and within their domain, all friendly undead units deal 10% more damage. Then all enemy units become soulbound. So I would say Domain of Death is a really good spell when you need to defend your cities. Soulbounding all enemies gives you a little bit of a chance of putting down decaying zombies. So I would say Tome of the Great Transformation, I don't think it's changed that much over time. It's just a really, really good tome. This brings us to Tome of the Cold Dark. Now, I'm going to call this is like another A tier tome that I'm going to call B tier. Just, I'm not saying every Shadow tome is A tier, but it does have drawbacks. It does have, like, you won't use this in literally every situation, but it is very, very strong. Number one, we have Frostspire. We have yet another research SPI for Shadow that gives you 10 knowledge. Then it gives you 3 more knowledge per adjacent snow or ice province. Then allies can touch this right before they're about to do a big battle. They can run up and touch the Frostspire, and then they get 30% chance to inflict frozen until the end of the next battle, which is weirdly strong when timed well. Quite frustrating, actually, that one. The main spell within Tome of the Cold Dark, and the entire reason you would go it, is Flash Freeze. An entire enemy province, all units within it take 20 frost damage and get -5 status resist. As it's a world map spell, you cannot cleanse that in battle. So Flash Freeze gives -5 status resist to enemy armies, which is outrageously powerful. This is like the main thing. The main thing of Cold Dark, Frostspire for Giga Knowledge, Flash Freeze to just make them lose 5 status resist. Now, it does have Marching Winter, which is okay. If you sprinted into Tome of the Cold Dark and you've sprinted into Marching Winter, you can put this on your cities. It will slowly terraform the entire city into snow and ice, which helps your Tome of Cryomancy SPI, helps your Tome of Cold Dark SPI. And then for each snow and ice province within your domain, you get 2 food and 2 production. That's not too amazing at this point, but if you do get it early, that 2 production can help you spit out your buildings that you're still completing onto your throne city. We do also have the Frostling transformation. That's a race transformation. You get 10 morale when standing on cold terrain, Arctic Walk, immunity to frozen, and 3 frost resist. I would say that these are... There's not too many people trying to freeze you these days. It was definitely a bigger issue, I would say, in version 1.0 of the game. A lot of the new stuff doesn't really freeze anymore. It does other stuff. And particularly when we look at some of these new units, that frost resist is actually pretty decent. If you fight stuff like Fallen Angels, lots of units will do frost damage if they're undead. Sometimes they'll do blight damage. I'm actually wondering, what does Bone Dragon do? Bone Dragon, yeah, he does blight damage. So, you know, some undead do frost, blight. That's like their whole shtick, right? Frost damage resist is also pretty good because it's pretty typical to go Tome of Cryomancy for like lots of builds. If you're playing multiplayer, if you're playing single player, then I mean it's just frost resist, right? But I mean it really depends on what you're fighting. I mean it's obviously a counter transformation. If you're fighting something good, then it's gonna be good. Now if you are fighting on cold terrain, then that's also pretty good because then you just get 10 morale. Okay, Veil of Darkness. Yeah, you get universal camouflage on an army for 3 turns. It's woo, I guess. Then you get Summon Snow Spirit, which is also like woo, I guess. Okay, so that's Tome of Cold Dark. Really good for Flash Freeze and Frostspire. The other stuff is okay as well. Tome of Severing, I'm gonna call this depends on really when you use it and how you use it. I'm going to call this a B tier tome. There are some situations where Tome of Severing is like crazy good. And there are some times where Tome of Severing doesn't really do that much. Now, Disrupting Blades, if you are doing certain builds that can reduce enemy status resist, be it Tome of Enchantment or maybe Dark Tyranny, then Disrupting Blades can proc pretty consistently and allow you to win melee versus melee fights. I mean, maybe not win them because your opponents could cleanse, but get a pretty large advantage because they would have to keep cleansing. If you don't have a high chance of disrupting, then you don't really get the best use out of Disrupting Blades. But I would say for the entirety of Tome of Severing, Disrupting Blades is its best aspect to it. As a whole, I'm going to call it a B tier tome because it does have one thing it does really, really, really well. Yeah. The second thing it does well is Conjure Spell Ward, which is pretty good, as you can imagine. You slap down a spell ward. Now it's a Spelljammer. Spelljammers stop enemies from casting world map spells, which is really strong. Enemy spells cost 100 more casting points. 100% more, I should say. So that's really strong too. You can slap this down anywhere, and it will generally make fights really, really, really easy. Because your enemies can't cast spells with release, you can't cast must. Astral Severance is, I don't think, particularly good. If you could find a way to stack a shitload of status resist without doing so much damage that you would probably just want to kill them anyway, then yeah, I guess Astral Severance could be good, but I can't really imagine anyone doing that actually. So target magic origin unit has a 60% chance of being killed, which is not great to spend your whole turn on. A lot of mana, a lot of combat casting, not something you can just freely use. And if unsuccessful, it inflicts disrupted. Most magic origin units worth using and worth actually using this on are going to be mythics who wouldn't even care if they're disrupted because they're mythics. Final Banishment is a pretty decent spell. All non-hero corpses on the map are destroyed, and then for each corpse destroyed, friendly units get a bolstered resistance and heal 5 temporary hit points. Final Banishment is mostly used to wipe out summon spam builds. For people like, trying to do lots of undead tyrants, fallen angels, maybe combo that with some Rose Knights. There's Grave March, stuff like that. You can use Final Banishment and just be like, no. The only problem with Final Banishment, it costs a lot of combat casting and mana. So if you don't have death magic, this one's going to run into a bit of problems. But even if even if all you do is kill 4 or 5 bodies, that's still going to be like 25 global healing, 5 bolstered resistance. So it could be pretty good. It's just a denial. It's like an anti-spell, right? Null Shield is interesting, but a bit limited. I think the problem with Null Shield is they need to keep it limited to shield units. In an ideal world, it would be shield and polearm units, but then that would break Pyre Templar, so I'm not sure what they can do about that. But yeah, Null Shield, I would definitely say it would be good if shield units were good, because if shield units could go into defense mode, and then they would get 5 status resist, the guy next to them would get 5 status resist, the guy to their left would give them 5 status resist, and you could get 15 status resist and like a shield wall type deal. This is really good. It's just hard to do that properly. Yeah. Then the last one up is Severing Golem. It's just a tier 5 mythic, not a particularly amazing tier 5 mythic. You have to build this in cities. It's not considered magic origin, so it can't get buffed with things like Cosmic Overdrive. Weakening Bolts is decent enough. It deals 18 damage, automatically weakens the enemy, and then has a 90% chance of disrupting enemies, applying the disrupting thing. Does 50% damage to adjacent enemies. Decent enough, just doesn't scale that well. Dispelling Field is a free action ability you can use every other turn. Dispels 1 negative status effect, and then for each status effect, so if you hit like 3 allies in itself, then it would get 4 strengthened, 4 status protection. So it's pretty decent from that perspective. Its main use is magical disruption. 5 enemy units take 30 frost damage and have a 90% chance of being disrupted. So Severing Golem can sit in the back and magical disruption. You can use that as a way to kind of encourage enemies to actually attack you, or just to get some global damage down before the actual fighting starts. Overall, Tome of Severing, I'm going to call it like a B tier tome. It's fine for what it does. It's a bit niche, and even when you use its niche well, it's definitely weak to people that have ways to just cleanse out of disrupting blades, which is going to be pretty hard. Tome of the Reaper. Where did I put Reaper? B tier. So Tome of the Reaper has an obvious downside where Tome of the Revenant and Tome of the Crimson Raid just ate it. On its own, it's not too bad for sure, but it does have a really big problem that it just totally got power creeped out by 2 other tomes. The main aspect, obviously, is Reaper. Reaper's main ability, I mean, the only thing we really need to understand about Reaper is it reaps. It's got the Finger of Death. It's a 1 action point ability that has a just 60% chance of killing an enemy. If that enemy doesn't die, they take 45 frost damage that ignores resist. So that's a pretty good ability, and that's the main use of the Reaper. You just reap people, you just hit them. Big damage. Not even damage, you just hit them with death. You just cast death. It's literally power word death. So, Reaper is obviously tanky, 150, 8-6. Undead can stack some stuff and remove those. The melee strike from Reaper has a 90% chance to inflict weakened, and then is piercing and breaching. So it ignores 50% of resistances. Greater corpse consumption, it can eat a body, get 3 strengthened, and heal 40. That's pretty good. Dark Rites, whenever an enemy unit dies, this unit heals 10 and gains strengthened, which is pretty strong as well. So Reapers will often have a lot of strengthened on them, which allows them to do a lot of damage. Finger of Death, of course, can be comboed with Flash Freeze and Blizzard. Overall, it's still a very strong unit and very, very unfun to fight. It just, as a tome, I would say that it's just been power creeped out by other tomes, which also give outrageously strong tier 5 units, but have better things within it. Not to say Tome of the Reaper is bad, though. It's just like every Shadow Tome right now is like S or A tier. So I have to call some of them B tier just to be fair. Soul Siphon Ritual is a siege project. You get 40 souls when you breach a city, and then you get 6 decaying zombies. All enemy units get soulbound. So if you're beating up a bunch of free cities, it's okay. But 40 souls is not the most amazing. 6 decaying zombies will obviously be decaying, so they start dying right at the beginning of the siege battle, and you have to sprint them up just to die. Enemy units getting soulbound. This one's not too bad, but it's not that amazing. Mark for Death is a pretty annoying spell. Target enemy unit loses 10 morale, because of course everything Shadow loses morale. They suffer 15 unblockable physical damage, then have a decaying zombie spawn adjacent to them. Then they get Visions of Death, which just repeats that effect at the start of every turn. So that's pretty strong, Visions of Death and Marked for Death. This is a pretty strong spell. Does use souls, but I would say this is just a really strong spell. Greater Reanimation resurrects target non-hero unit as a corrupt soul if not undead, and 100% of its hit points if undead. It has something you can, if the corrupt soul or undead survives, you can spend souls to keep it. It's, that's all I have to say. Harvest population. Target-friendly city no longer gains any food income and gets negative 20 stability, but you get 30 souls income. As we'll see later, this has kind of just been power creeped out. So the main thing for Tome of the Reaper is Marked for Death and Summon Reaper, and then we'll see why these other tomes have kind of just totally power creeped it off the face of the earth. Even though it's still a good tome, which should tell you how strong Shadow is right now. Tome of Calamity, I would say, is a decent tome, but suffers a lot of weaknesses. Yeah. Desecrate Land is a terraforming spell. A target province is pillaged, and then you grant its rewards and lose alignment. Then it becomes an Ashlands. Which is okay. I mean, Desecrate Land could certainly be annoying, I guess, if like you just run up to an enemy capital and you spam it a bunch just to annoy them. But out of a tier 4 tome, this is not exactly the big winner that I can just annoy people by pillaging their provinces with magic. It's like, okay, it's annoying, but sure. Comet of Calamity is a 30 magic damage spell, AoE 2, 50% chance of freezing enemies, but they all get 2 stacks of Ghostfire. It's okay. That's all I can really say. Tome of Calamity. Comet of Calamity. It's okay. It's not the worst combat spell in the world, but it's not the best. It's certainly one that you could be quite annoying with, but that 50% chance is not the greatest. 50% is definitely more than 0%, so, I mean, just being able to freeze enemies is quite difficult. Freezing is, of course, just a stun. Ritual of Calamity is, it's a siege province? Yeah, you, at the start of every turn during the siege, a random province improvement of the besieged city is pillaged. Okay, more on this pillaging stuff. This one's not actually a terribly bad siege project. The only problem is the actual like effect on the battle itself isn't too large. All defenders get a stack of Ghostfire and 2 accursed ogres appear. 2 accursed ogres at this stage of the game are not really the most threatening, and that's all I can really say. Realistically, if I want to use a siege project, I'll probably want to use something better. Although Ritual of Calamity could be decent for just making money by pillaging while I siege a city. But again, at this stage of the game, we're not really caring that much about pillaging 2, maybe 3 provinces, not the biggest. Accursed Armors is okay. All our melee units get 2 defense and then have a 30% chance of afflicting enemies with Ghostfire and Misfortune when they're hit. Personally, I'd have preferred this to be maybe a bit higher, because Shadow, it really, the main use of this tome is for battle mages, and battle mages that are getting a melee unit in the front to take hits, they aren't particularly known for being tanky. And if you're going with the tier 5 mythic route or the tier 4 mythic route, then you can't enchant them with this. So I would prefer if Cursed Armors was like a little bit better. It's not used very often, Accursed Armors. Accursed Projectiles gives physical, ranged, and magic attacks, 1 fire damage, 1 frost damage, and they inflict ghost fire. This was nerfed. It did used to give 2 and 2, now it gives 1 and 1. I would say that after the nerf, Tome of Calamity pretty much stopped existing. It is a B tier tome, but there's a lot of better tomes, and if I am doing battle mages, then there's a lot more times I'd rather have something else right now. Summon Calamity Dragon is pretty decent. We don't need to go look into his actual stats. His main thing here is, of course, Ghostfire Storm. 3 enemy units suffer 10 fire damage, 10 frost damage, and get 2 stacks of Ghostfire. Then it repeats at the start of your turn for your next 3 turns. This is just a decent way to get some global damage down and just to whittle away the enemy army before a fight. His actual attacks aren't too great. 44 damage seems good in theory, but because it's 3 AP, you can't be very mobile with it. It is 8 range, which is hypothetically good. It only afflicts 1 Ghostfire. At any rate, Calamity Dragon's like a decent to have like 1 Calamity Dragon in your stack, but I often see people not really caring that much to get him, particularly because if he gets locked in melee, he can't do a lot. The Prosperity Dragon, if it gets locked in melee, has the Mask of Prosperity, which I think is a little bit better. Mask of Calamity is every time the casting unit is attacked, that's you, the Calamity Dragon, the unit you marked with the Mask of Calamity takes 10 damage, and then it gets a stack of Ghostfire at the start of its turns. It's not bad, it's just not particularly great. Yeah. Then of course we've got a Cursed Body, Draconic Rage, because it's a Dragon Demon. Which, I mean, Dragon Demons are cool. Overall, the Calamity Dragon, he's not bad, he's just Our SPI over here is the Accursed Shrine, which, when placed, alter the terrain into Desolate. And then when you have a ruined adjacent province, you get 3 of every resource. That's not particularly amazing, and I don't think anybody has tried to make it work. The main thing is summoning down the Accursed Trickster. Now, the problem with the Accursed Trickster, which apparently isn't being listed in that category, the Accursed Trickster did get a nerf, where Maddening Phantasm became a 90% chance to go insane instead of a 100% chance to go insane, which does seem to have ended Accursed Trickster being like that big a deal because, well, yeah. Overall, it's a battle mage, a tier 4 battle mage, 95 4 stats, so it's got at least like a tanky stat line, but it's not racial, so it doesn't get those form traits, doesn't get those transformations, so it'll always be a little bit squishier than you'd want it to be. We do have Duplicity here. When this unit's total hit points drop to 50% or lower, it creates a clone. The clone does 30% less damage and has Astral Reflection. And then the Astral Reflection is that if the original unit dies, this unit replaces it. So the general idea with the Accursed Tricksters is you sit back at range trying to use Maddening Phantasm. You combo that with probably a Tome of Amplification to get that to be 7 range, and then you try to afflict enemies with Insanity from super long range. Downside, when that became a 90% instead of a 120% chance, that kind of killed the Accursed Trickster. I would like to see it be maybe a little bit tankier. Maybe we could push that to like 105 HP, because it's not racial. Its Ghostfire Bolts is a mere 16 damage, which is fine, but outside of Maddening Phantasm, it's not terribly great. We can use Tricky Escape to get out of melee with enemies and teleport far away. But because it uses your whole turn and only applies 3 stacks of Ghostfire, it's not the greatest turn. The only real reason to use it is if you're fighting maybe like a charge unit, and like you don't want to take the retaliation attack for moving out. But yeah, I mean, even if you're fighting something like a Pyre Templar, they'll actually first strike your Tricky Escape anyway, which is kind of funny. Overall, it's not a bad unit, it's just been nerfed down. The Tome got nerfed down a bit, and it's brought it down. And compared to how broken some of these Shadow Tomes get, it's not, I mean, it's still a tome you would probably go if you're doing battle mages or if you're doing range, but it, yeah, it definitely went down a few tiers. Tome of Oblivion got a couple changes. It's not, I would still call it pretty bad. Probably Tome of Oblivion, I would call this a C tier tome. We've got Summon Living Fog, which is a mythic unit. It's a tier 4 mythic that is not that amazing. If I actually just go look here at Fog, it does have some attributes that are pretty good, and it's got some attributes that are pretty not good. It is just a Balor in a shadow skin, if you ever noticed that, by the way. Okay, our main ability here is Mind Strike. This is a repeating melee attack that does 17 damage that cannot be reduced, with a 60% chance to make enemies go insane. Being that it is a mythic unit, it can't be buffed in any way, so that'll just be 17 damage. You can get it Cosmic Overdrive, and that's it. Its second ability, which was added later, is Call of the Void. This creates a Devouring Void hazard in a 1 hex radius. Now, Devouring Void is a bit annoying because it doesn't hit flying or floating people, which I guess was originally to make it so that this unit would float over it, but now that it has immunity to Devouring Void, I really feel like Devouring Void should hit flying and floating enemies. It doesn't even make a mention that it doesn't, but you put it down, enemies suffer 20 unresistible physical damage and lose 3 morale. Then if they run through it, they suffer that again. Then if they end their turn on it, they suffer it again. So that's a pretty decent way for the Living Fog to kind of just sit in front, create terrain, be a real annoying piece of shit. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, it's just the insanity and the unresistible damage on Mind Strike. It might be a decent unit if the rest of the tome was good, but the rest of the tome isn't that great either. Sleep of Oblivion did get nerfed. Originally, Sleep of Oblivion would kill a unit, then revive it in 2 turns. Now it kills a unit, and the body can't die. Now, because the body cannot die, and it cannot be revived, this has done a lot of damage to Sleep of Oblivion. Now, of course, you can argue that it wasn't fun for people to Sleep of Oblivion your units, then consume the corpse to deny them the revive, and to just have like an automatic kill that couldn't be resisted. The downside is now that it works the way it does, it's not really that great. So, particularly at its casting cost, we're not doing very good. Ritual of Somnia is you target an enemy army, and then at the start of the battle, all units have a 90% chance of becoming stunned for 2 turns. So, that's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Devouring Void did get buffed a lot because it now, of course, ignores all defenses. Devouring Void, you summon it down, slowly increases, does damage. Its general idea is to be good against melee formations, but melee formations tend to stack so much AoE healing and regeneration that Devouring Void on its own isn't going to break through it. But of course, you could combo Devouring Void with other effects to try to get through it. Overall, it's just Fog of Insanity, target friendly city, and then any domain in the, any battle in the domain of the city with Fog of Insanity has a Fog of Insanity battle enchantment, which causes enemies to have a 20% chance of gaining insanity every turn. So that's pretty strong, and this does make Tome of Oblivion like a pretty decent tome to defend your cities, because any fight that happens within Fog of Insanity is you're rolling the dice a lot on that insanity chance, right? Even if you have a lot of status resist, even if you're only taking a 5% chance of going insane every turn, that's a lot of dice on all your units, you know? So this takes us, of course, to Tome of the Crimson Rain, which I'm going to call S tier. Why are we calling Tome of the Crimson Rain S tier? Because it does a lot and is very, 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 very strong, and potentially does some things that it probably should never be doing. So we don't have an SPI or anything like that. We just go immediately into the Tears of the Crimson Sovereign. Not a particularly great combat spell. Not even one I would use, really. But at least they did fairly cost it low. A lot of times they've got like utility combat spells that aren't too great, and then they'll give them a mana and combat casting cost of like 150. And I'm like, what? I mean, I don't think everybody should just have to have death magic and unlimited mana to cast spells that aren't particularly great to begin with. So I do appreciate that they actually made this a low cost. But what its actual effects are not too great. When you cast it for the next 2 turns, 3 random enemy units take 10 physical damage and have a 90% chance to gain a blood parasite. And 3 random friendly units heal 10 hit points and gain fortune. This doesn't seem to target damage-friendly units, it just seems to target any. Maybe it gets changed to target damage-friendly units in the future, but it doesn't seem to actually prefer hitting them right now. And then its overall effect on the battle is not too great. For a tier 4 tome spell, this one is weirdly not really worth casting. Now, it does count as a debuff spell, so you can enhance it with other ways. But even then, it's just not really that good. But now let's start talking about the crazy aspects. Mantle of the Blood Noble. Now this one's a bit confusing because you only need to look at one thing. Grants enchanted units coagulate. Okay, that's done. That's what this does. You might be wondering about the rest of it then. So at the start of combat, for each friendly non-summoned tier 1 and tier 2 unit, you gain 5 hit points and 5% healing received. So let's say you had 10 tier 2 units. Then your tier 3, 4, and 5 units, who are actually being buffed by this, would get 50 hit points and get 50% more healing. That's crazy. That's actually not really worth using, actually. If you're using that many low tier units this late in the game, you'll probably lose the battle. So the most of what Mantle of the Blood Noble does is it affects tier 3, 4, and 5 units, which does allow it to affect mythics. This is one of the only things you can do to buff up mythic units. Now, what is Coagulate? Whenever this unit is hit by an attack, once per turn, get 1 stack of bolstered defense, 1 stack of bolstered resist. That's very strong, and that's particularly strong because it can affect these already very tanky mythic units. So we're off to a good start with Mantle of Blood Noble. Additionally, there is some space to maybe use like a couple tier 2 supports because they would buff all those mythics, but yeah, it's just, you're mostly looking at for the Coagulate. We do have Gift of Old Blood. Now this is supposed to be the vampire transformation. I have not thought very highly of this one. I don't think it's bad, I just don't think it's worth waiting to a tier 4 tome. But what it does do is you give your entire race the undead unit type, which overall I would actually say is a debuff. It's one of the only unit types in the game that is still kind of just a debuff. Pretty big weakness right there. Now you do get Life Drinker. When an adjacent unit dies, you get strengthened and heal for 10 temporary hit points, which isn't very good. I would probably rather just have Life Steal, but Life Drinker is acceptable. Then your base attacks have a 60% chance of inflicting Blood Parasite. So that doesn't even affect AoEs or anything like that, which makes it quite difficult to use Gift of the Old Blood. So in total, I don't think this transformation is very good. But let's go back to the good stuff. We have Crimson Court. Tier 3, 4, and 5 units get 5 hit points, 2 experience, and you get the Crimson Court Magistrate. Now, the Crimson Court Magistrate lets you gain mana from vassals when migrating, raising, or pillaging. And then, in addition to that, for some reason, it doesn't mention that vassals also grant you 10 mana per population. This allows you to have absolutely unlimited mana on like 1 or 2 vassals in the late game, which it's not too amazing to have unlimited mana, but because you're Shadow and you might not have spec'd into mana, some Shadow builds actually do run out of mana into the late game spamming with death magic, but Crimson Court will very quickly have you at multiple thousands of mana. Now, the other thing that makes Crimson Reign Giga S tier is of course the Blood Exarch. The Blood Exarch is probably something that shouldn't exist in this game. But let's look at him. 160, 6'8 stats, very tanky dude. Now he is undead, so he's got those weaknesses, but we can take care of them by buffing. His main ability that becomes problematic is Blood Pull. Now he does have a nerf on the open beta right now. Blood Pull is being changed from a free action ability to a leave 1 AP ability with 90% chance to hit, but it is still a 4 range ability with a 90% chance to pull enemies, which is very, 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 very strong. And if you do fish, if you have Tome of the Cold Dark, something like that, and you do just go fishing for pulls on enemies, pulling the enemy lord is often just a kill, and killing the enemy lord wins you the battle. So Blood Pull is very, I'm going to call it controversial, but only because I think it's quite overpowered. There's not really a controversy so much as everybody hates it and doesn't think it's good for the game. But Blood Exarch doesn't just stop at Blood Pull. We of course have Parasitic Cleave. This is a 3-use ability that hits 3 times in a row with a 90% chance to apply Blood Parasite. So into enemy formations, we can cleave, hit 3 times potentially, apply Blood Parasite, or just generally do a good chunk of damage. Some people think physical damage is bad. I actually think in the current environment that there's not really any more physical resist than there is magical resist. They tend to be about equal, and sometimes magical resist is actually higher because most people would prefer to try to sprint and find magic resist, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Siphon Lesser is a very powerful ability. Target unit sustains damage. Damage is increased by 10 for each unit tier below 5. Then you heal 50% of the damage you deal, And if you kill an enemy, you get Blood of the Exarch. Now, Blood of the Exarch, it does start on cooldown, but if you do get this, target friendly tier 3 or higher unit, though it is being changed on the open beta again to not affect heroes, gets a permanent 20% damage, 10% critical hit chance, and 25% critical hit damage. As you can imagine, when this applied to heroes, it was a bit silly billy, because getting Blood of the Exarch onto a hero even once was like battle ending. Like being able to get that much more damage is like, oh my god. But now you can only use it on regular units, but that does mean that you can use Blood of the Exarch onto other Blood Exarchs if you get a kill, which it doesn't really seem like you can. Now it does start with its own Coagulate, which has some like anti-synergy with the tome, because one of the tome's main buffs is that you get Coagulate under your units, but this unit already has it by default. But I would say that you can combo and just have like 2 or 3 Blood Exarchs in your stacks, and then, you know, have like a bunch of Fallen Angels or stuff like that. So yeah. Control loss immunity, Demolisher, Heartless is all typical. Life Drinker, that's what we were talking about. When an adjacent unit dies, you get strengthened and 10 temporary hit points. And then it, of course, has Oppressing Aura. At the end of your turn, all adjacent enemies have a 90% chance of getting 10 morale loss and getting a stack of Misfortune. So overall, the Blood Exarch is just a crazy strong unit whose blood pull is just absolute insanity. I think this unit released the single most broken unit ever in Age of Wonders 4, ever. Even on the open beta, he still looks to be pretty strong. And I think the reason he's hated is just blood pull existing at all at 4 range, 5 range if you get him the Paragon of Astral. It just makes him quite frustrating to deal with. That's all I can really say. He will be very, very, very frustrating. It's just not fun to lose the dice roll and then your hero gets pulled across the map and dies. Overall, Tome of Crimson Reign, it's a bit hard to quantify because it's got like, this is really strong. This unit is like crazy strong. Then the rest of the tome is like, okay. Not really great. It's like, okay. So it's a bit hard to quantify Tome of Crimson Reign. I think if Gift of the Old Blood was changed from basic attacks to just attacks, I would like it a lot more. That's about it. I mean, really, the tome wouldn't even be that big a deal if it wasn't for the Blood Exarch. But the Blood Exarch is just, ugh. Now, Tome of the Revenant, this is like an S+ tome. I don't even know how to describe Tome of the Revenant. Tome of the Revenant is just nutty. Like, Tome of Crimson Reign is good because it's got like a crazy tier 5 mythic and then like great support for other mythics within it. Then it's got like really good economy. So like Tome of the Crimson Reign is like a pretty solid tome. I'm gonna call it like, it's like an S or like an A tier tome. But like Tome of the Revenant, this is like hard S. This is like hard S. This tome is a bit much, I think. So why is Tome of the Revenant so nutty? So first off, we have Necropolis, which is a special province improvement that gets you souls and then souls per adjacent research post. Now this is just generally good. This is just generally good for soul generation, but then it also gives you the ability to construct Undead Titans. Undead Titans are a tier 4 mythic unit, so it's a pretty tanky charge unit. You've probably fought them. They get Conjure Skeleton. They conjure a skeleton. It's a free action ability, usable every 3 turns. Summons down an extra unit. Now that's pretty strong. The Undead Titan can be constructed at your cities once they have Necropolis. So you can kind of spam down these Undead Titans to support Fallen Angels. If we combo this tome, maybe with Tome of the Crimson Reign, they'll have Coagulate. So that's pretty good right there. Then of course we got Chamber of the Right. Units drafted in the city get natural regeneration. So they would have natural regeneration and Coagulate. So these Undead Titans would be pretty tanky dudes. Of course, then they also have Undead Resentment, which gives all undead units 2 Spirit Resist and 2 Fire Resist and Vicious Killer. Because undead just continue to knock off more and more and more morale. We have Unholy Champion. Now the reason Unholy Champion is so broken, I'll tell you what it does, and then I'll tell you why it's really broken. Unholy Champion, target friendly unit gets 50% damage, and it gets undying. So when it dies for the first time, it revives with 50% of its hit points after 2 turns. Then it has Armor of Despair, so enemies with low morale do less damage to you. Then all enemies in a 2 hex radius automatically take 10 morale damage, unresistible. On its surface, this already looks like a really, really strong spell. So why does it go from really strong to just straight up like broken? Because when we combo that with the which one is it? Yeah, the Order Amplifier Lens, Order damage spells deal 10 spirit damage. Not too important. Order debuff spells remove all positive status effects. Well, as you can imagine, this tome, despite being pure shadow, was actually made Order Shadow for the theme, which, okay, fine, even though it's a pure shadow tome, it gets to be Order Shadow. That unfortunately means Unholy Champion counts as an Order spell, which can be used with the Order Lens, and now is a full purge of every debuff, and does 10 morale damage, and makes you permanently get 50% damage, and gives you Undying, and gives you Armor of Despair. As you can imagine, this is an outrageously big tempo in battles. This can be used to purge Steadfast, this can be used to purge all buffs before you go for kills, and this can be used on your hero to just give them a 50% damage buff for the rest of the game. Revenant Whispers, a lot of people didn't notice just how strong this was until they started noticing how strong this was. Why is it so strong? So when this stack is attacked, you conjure 3 skeletons with Unholy Champion. Ooh, you conjure 3 skeletons. Is that why it's strong? Because, no, actually, no, it's not. It's a 2 demoralized. Now, we did mention the Tome of the Doom Herald back here. Tome of the Doom Herald gives you Prelude to Doom, giving you 3 demoralized. Then Joy Siphoners gives you race morale damage. Once we combo the 2 demoralized with the 3 demoralized, that's 25 morale damage that people take, unpreventable even by cold-blooded, unpreventable even by undead, because it just removes your morale. It doesn't damage it, it just like removes it. And then you get 3 skeletons with Unholy Champion, who, if you've gone Doom Herald, also do morale damage on every hit, because they'll actually be racial, because skeletons are actually racial. They do get their bones from somewhere. Then these skeletons will also do morale damage. Then we've got Unholy Champion comboing with this to do more morale damage. Then, if you can remember over here, Tome of Torment gives Language of Anguish, which would actually mean that every Unholy Champion is reducing 15 morale. So, as you can imagine, this gets a little bit excessive. The only thing that could possibly make this worse is, of course, the Fallen Angel. Now, why is the Fallen Angel so broken? Because look at this thing. What the hell? Okay, so first off, Ray of Corruption is a 4 hex long, 3 hex wide line, 1 AP nuke. So just whoosh, nukes people. They get an automatic 2 weakened and an automatic 3 remorse with no chance to resist it. Remorse, if they don't cleanse it at the end of their turn, will cause them to lose morale. You then also get lifesteal for a reason, I guess. Does pretty good damage at 40 damage. Corrupt Bolts, this is its repeatable attack, automatically applies weakened and remorse, which is pretty good. Now this unit, particularly if you got a Coagulate and Undead Resentment and all those buffs, is just going to end up being very, very tanky, very difficult to remove from the board, because it's still a tier 5 mythic with all those tier 5 mythic buffs. We have Armor of Despair, Dark Rites, so whenever an enemy unit dies, this unit heals 10 and gets strengthened. You can combo that with Visions of Destiny's Shadow to heal 20 each time something dies. So if you don't kill these units, they can quickly get out of control. Then the creme de la creme, the finishing move of this unit, is Dark Temptation. Now what Dark Temptation does is target non-hero enemy unit has a 120% chance of becoming dominated, which is strong for a unit that's tanky, for a unit that is quite difficult to remove from the battle. Now you have to lock them in melee every single turn, because if you don't lock them in melee, they can use Dark Temptation, which will give them dominate, which is considered very powerful to lose your units to the enemy. If they do resist it, they take 40 unresistible damage, 2 status vulnerability, and get 3 more remorse. As you can imagine, then, this is why, like, Tome of the Crimson Rain and Tome of the Reaper, I'm like, oh yeah, they got like a good tier 5 unit and like a good spell. This one, like a absolute insane tier 5 unit and like a good enchantment. And this one, I'm like, it's like everything in this tome is insane. The weakest part of this tome is that undead units get drafted with natural regeneration, which in a different tome, like if you imagine all demon units get natural regeneration, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. It wouldn't work with war breeds, but you get the idea, right? Like the fact that that's the weakest part of this tome is nutty. Okay. So that brings us, of course, to Tome of the Eternal Lord. Okay, Tome of the Eternal Lord is not too strong. Now, I did say that we would look at the Battle Mage. They really do seem to be pushing this whole Battle Mage thing, like the Shadow Battle Mage. You do get Curse of the Reaper. There's a full action ability at range 4. That's Finger of Death, but instead of a 1 action Finger of Death, it's a 3 action Finger of Death. If the enemy resists it, they take 45 frost damage and it ignores resist. It's a debuff ability. It's not magic. It's not an attack. It's nothing like that. I do think, yeah, Fleshcarved Runes technically will apply to it, but the general idea here, the general problem, it's hard to keep battle mages within 4 range of an enemy and not within their zone of control. Like, you'd have to run up to enemies and then end your turn, and then on your turn you're going to be forced into melee or you'll die. So it's not terribly useful. Its main use is kind of deterring enemies from being within your battle mages. Maybe, I mean, I guess that would be the best way to put it, just deterring enemies from being near your battle mages is all I can say. Bit hard to use, that one. Raise Undead Army is completely terrible. I'm not even going to talk about it. 150 souls to raise some tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 undead is not very good. No matter how you phrase it. The only way I could really see this being used is if you and your opponent are like locked into an eternal death match and like 90% of both armies die, then maybe you could use Raise Undead Army. But if your lord dies, then you can't cast it anyway, and then you would be waiting for your lord to revive, so you'd just be drafting new units. I mean, for 300 world map casting, are you going to use Raise Undead Army, or are you just going to try to get another Fallen Angel? You'll probably go for the Fallen Angel. Withering Mist is not terribly good either. Shocking, I know. Withering Mist has the downside where it doesn't apply on the turn you cast it, only applies on the turns after that, which is quite difficult. For 3 turns, each turn for 3 turns, so after this turn, all enemy units take 15 frost damage, have a 90% chance of becoming blinded, and have a 90% chance of becoming weakened. Now, you can cast this maybe early in the battle and get it rolling, like on the turn before you start attacking. Blinding enemies is good, weakening them is good. These chances of doing it aren't too great, and at the end of the day, most of the time, this is just like the weaker, shittier cousin of, tier 5 Astral in every single way, including that Disruption Wave is like 9 billion times better. Disruption Wave is like crazy overpowered broken, and then you look at Shadow and Withering Mist. There's a good reason why pretty much every Shadow build actually just ends up going tier 5 Astral. You just combo Shadow Astral and go tier 5 Astral. Yeah, I mean, it's just, these are just not terribly great. That brings us to Battlefield Reanimation. Now, this does have a couple advantages. All friendly undead units come back to life with 50% of their hit points. That one's pretty good. Then non-undead corpses come back to life as decaying zombies. Now, that does mean you can deny bodies to your opponent. If his units are dead and your units are dead, then you can revive your units and also revive his units so he can't get them summoned back. This is weird because that's just straight up better than Mass Revive, because Mass Revive only heals friendly dead units who have Faithful and Zeal. So it's a bit weird to me that Mass Revive is just directly inferior. But yeah, I mean, at least they get the I'd actually say this tome ends up being a little bit better just because of Exalted Champion. Exalted Champion is pretty good, I'll say. At least for that, right? The Shadow Tome just doesn't have much. Battlefield Reanimation, this is its main attribute. Just picking your dudes up and dropping their dudes as zombies. So, yeah, okay. So then let's talk about this as a whole. Yeah, let's zoom that in. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Okay, go to monitor and then close you. Okay, what are the tomes then as a whole? Cryomancy is S tier because it's just a blade tome with a really good SPI and world map spell. It does literally what every other blade tome does, but better. Crimson Rain, I could arguably bring this down to A tier at this point. I think for the... Wait, what? I did X. There we go. That's weird. I did cut command and didn't cut. Crimson Rain I'm going to call S tier still probably, but it does look like they'll nerf it on the open beta to where it'll probably be A tier after the nerfs. I do hope they do a little bit to it. Okay, Revenant, as I went over, Revenant's just insane. This tome is just nuts. Nothing more to say. Necromancy, good early game tempo, gets you some souls generation, guarantees that you have a research SPI onto your cities, and it just gets you the ability to summon down some skeletons to help on the world map. Bloodright, I just think is a very versatile tome that has some decent scaling for racial options, particularly for boosting up battle mages. If you can maybe do a battle mage build that has a front line, this is pretty good, Bloodright. Otherwise, I would say it's mostly about tempoing out early. Doom Herald is just outrageously good. In the past, it wasn't too good due to a lot of issues, but these days, Doom Herald is just scaling really, 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 really well. Tome of Torment, I mean, we've gone through it. It's just a well-constructed tome with really no downside, good SPI, good everything. Great Transformation, I would say, is also just really good. Generates a lot of souls and also gives you pretty good buffs to your racial units and to your melee units. Tome of Corruption in a tempo is just really, really good with that Umbral Mistress. Corrupted Boon can be used to wipe heroes off the map. And then... what is the third thing it does? I mostly know... Oh, the Treacherous Reflection. Yeah, Treacherous Reflection can just be really difficult to deal with in some situations. Cold Dark is useful for the -5 status resist on enemies. And it gives you a research SPI that's very strong. Honestly, those two things alone make it good. Tome of Severing is decent, but it's a bit hard to get it working. It's not going to work in a lot of builds, and even the builds it does work in are going to struggle a little bit. It also has this weird aspect where it's very much based and balanced around melee units and then giving you a construct in the back. I guess you could do Tome of Severing if you were doing like a shield build, and then you would use the golem in the back. I don't know. I mean, it could work hypothetically. Reaper, I mean, Reaper's got the same problem Crimson Rain has, is that Revenant is just like, urgh. But I would say if I'm going to combo a tome with Revenant, it'll be Crimson Rain, not Reaper, for pretty obvious reasons. Tome of Calamity used to be significantly better. There's also a problem where battle mages have like a lot of tomes right now that they want to grab. Battle mages want to grab Amplification. Transmutation's really good for them. The Elemental Tome, I can't remember its name. That one's really good for them as well. Calamity is pretty good for them, but I mean, in addition to Calamity, you might even try to go with what is that tome? The Gold Touch to get resistance. I mean, it's pretty debatable. Golden Golems aren't very good, but Gold Touch does give you that 2 racial resistance, and Battle Mages are kind of known for dying very easy, but they do need damage. Like Tome of Calamity, it's like B tier. It's like, it's good, it's just not utterly fantastic anymore. Eternal Lord, I'm going to call B tier. Like, you're not trolling by going Eternal Lord, but you are making yourself weaker than the other options. Tentacle is just not good. Shades is like S tier in Pyre Templars. Otherwise, it's like, it's usable. Tome of Oblivion, it's like, it's usable. I mean, it's got the Oblivion, it's got the Devouring Mist stuff, so like, that's okay, right? Tome of Souls, this one I actually think, I mean, Tome of Souls, I'll just be real. I don't think Tome of Souls fits in any build right now. I think it's actually just like crazy underpowered. So that's the entire video. Nothing really more to say here. So as always, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. And as always, I actually got this in under 2 hours. I think that's a new record, right? But as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.